Good afternoon. We are here today in yet another wonderful desert area in the Pacific Northwest. This is an area that is in central Washington state, and it is incredibly arid. Deserts are amazing places because of how they're created. So this particular desert is an area that gets very little rain because the Cascade Mountains to the west of us have taken up most of the moisture. So this is a rain shadow desert. And it is that and will always be that because of the Cascade Mountains. There are many other types of deserts. There are deserts that simply are in areas where there's never any precipitation. Weather patterns create those. There are deserts that have been created by human beings, vast deserts. And there are many, such as the Sahara and the Gobi and other deserts, that are expanding because of human activity. So the thing to always keep in mind is that there are natural deserts and there are man-made deserts. And part of the problem is that we humans always want the water. And water is a necessity, even in a desert. I say even because there are often springs and seeps and areas that are moist in natural desert that a lot of wildlife and plants come to. The interesting thing is that man-made deserts are usually the worst because there's very little life that's able to survive there, and they are barren, and they have virtually no plant or animal diversity in them because we have obliterated them. Just keep in mind that there are many different types of desert, and there are extremely low rainfall deserts that are natural, and there are low rainfall deserts that are man-made. It's always interesting to look at a desert or read about a desert and imagine that this is a natural desert. Is it one that formed as a result of a rain shadow effect from a range of mountains? Or is it one that there simply wasn't any moisture in the area and that desert was there? Or did we as human beings come along, take the water for agriculture and deprive the rest of the landscape of any moisture? So all those things have happened around the world. We are in an area that is known as the Beasley Hills. And the Beasley Hills are north of Grandview and west of Ephrata, Washington. Amazing mountains. They're really low mountains, and they have high diversity of native plant life and native insects and some mammals. They're not renowned for their mammal population, but they are truly beautiful in the spring because of the massive amount of blooms that cover these hills. I would like to visit with you today about the sagebrush obligate birds that we have found today. One of these species that we located was the Lark Sparrow, which is an absolutely gorgeous sparrow. It is a sage obligate, and it is a large sparrow, much larger than your average 4.5, 5-inch long sparrow. It's over 6 inches, and they are amazing singers, but they love sagebrush, and they will only breed where there is sagebrush. Another species of bird that we found that is a sagebrush obligate is the Sage Thrasher. Sage Thrashers are the northernmost member of the thrasher family in the western United States, and they inhabit only sagebrush areas. They are complete sagebrush obligate, though sometimes they will also nest in hop sage and bitterbrush, as well as some other woody shrubs that grow in sagebrush habitat. These birds are amazing singers, and the male will sit up on a chosen perch and sing on and on and on, all day long and all night long sometimes. So they are incredible vocalists. The adult female is more oriented towards the ground and frequently follows insects along the ground, small lizards, and grabs them. And they frequently feed off insects from the ground. Thrashers are an omnivore. If there's berries to be had, they will eat ripe berries. If there are insects to eat, they'll eat insects. And they'll eat even small lizards. So, beautiful bird, only here during the breeding season in the spring and early summer. The other sage obligate that we found today was brewer's sparrow, which is also a migrant or a neotropic migrant that comes up out of central Mexico. And they come north into the Sagebrush Great Basin and the Columbia Basin. And that's where they breed, is only in sagebrush. So these are birds that require sage, and they are part of the greater ecosystem of sagebrush areas. Sagebrush is so vitally important, as I've stressed over and over again in this series, and it is important because it holds ground cover. It provides cover both for birds and insects and all kinds of reptiles and amphibians. And it also blooms in the fall of the year, and it provides a huge amount of pollen and nectar to native pollinators in September. So a very important plant. The other thing to talk about that I need to share with you is that we also found some beautiful, beautiful spring flowers today. And they bloom in this desert only in the spring, and they bloom for such a short period of time. We found beautiful purple Bitterroot, which is an amazing plant that grows up out of the ground with just its buds, no leaves, and purple red buds, which then open into the beautiful purple or white flowers. And the white ones have pink and yellow centers, and the purple ones have yellowy centers, and they grow and bud out, and they may have 1 or 2 buds at a time, and gradually the plant, all of its 5 or 6 buds will all bloom, and they are beautiful, and they attract large numbers of pollinators, which are very important to desert blooming plants. Another plant that we found today in large numbers was Hedgehog Cactus. This is the only other cactus in the state of Washington, and it is a beautiful cactus. It looks like a miniature barrel cactus, and it has beautiful magenta blooms. And hedgehog cactus are also vitally important to native pollinators early in the spring, especially native bees. We often will visit those plants. The hedgehog cactus grows in dense clumps. And today I found one clump that had 27 different cactus all smashed into one little area together. And that's how they survive, because they protect each other with all their spines. The other thing that they frequently fall victim to, and that is rodents that come and eat the centers out of the hedgehog cactus to get a hold of the flower buds and the flowers. And in doing so, they open the cactus up to all kinds of insects, and they also open it up to losing a lot of the internal moisture, and eventually the plant's unable to compete with the loss of all the moisture, and they die. I saw a lot of hedgehog cactus today that rodents had eaten the center out of the plant. Another beautiful plant that we had today was beard's tongue, which is a member and close relative of penstemon. This beard's tongue is absolutely brilliant. It glows a purple blue. It grows in very select sites, and so it requires very specific types of soil, and usually in very hot lithophil type areas. This plant produces copious numbers of blooms. And so what always makes me wonder is, how does a plant that grows in such dry terrain, in such shallow soils, rocky areas, have the energy to produce literally hundreds of blooms? on a single plant. It is truly a phenomenon. Frequented by loads of native bees, ants, butterflies, and moths. All utilize the beard's tongue because of the nectar and the pollen that's present. Another amazing plant is the lark spur, the desert lark spur, which is just this beautiful blue, just incredible. And it comes up in the same general area year in and year out. And the reason it survives is because all during October, November, December, when there is some moisture, its bulbs collect that moisture and store it. And in the spring, regardless of what the weather's been in the spring, it has enough moisture to send up a shoot and produce blooms. And larkspur are members of the delphinium family. And delphiniums and larkspurs are very poisonous. Despite that, they're still pollinators, native pollinating bees and ants that will pollinate larkspur blossoms. And the blossoms are absolutely gorgeous and they're very uniquely shaped. And they attract large numbers of these small native bees that will pollinate them. Also several butterfly species. So it's really interesting to see these gorgeous larkspurs, and they're so blue, it doesn't look real. Another plant that frequents this area is buckwheat. And there are buckwheats, several species of buckwheats in this desert area. But buckwheats are dependent on the amount of rain that falls in the late winter, early spring, and that determines the size and the number of flowers that they produce that spring. So today, I noticed that a lot of buckwheats were very small. The plant had not grown out much. It sent up short shoots and very short stems and very small flowers this year because there just hasn't been the rain in this area. So those plants were still blooming. They were providing all kinds of pollen and nectar to pollinators, but they weren't anywhere near what they are in a more moist site. Some other plants that we saw earlier was Perry's daisy, which is a beautiful composite that grows all over arid areas in the Pacific Northwest. This plant grows in nice clumps. The plant is beautiful. It has gray, greenish leaves and white flowers with pink in them. And it's a composite, which means it's actually many, many flowers that are all together in one head. And that is just truly beautiful. Another composite that we found today was desert aster. And these little short stalked desert asters are just beautiful purple, some of them purple blue. And they are frequented by butterflies that enjoy nectaring on them, and some bees and ants that pollinate on them. So all these composite flowers are very, very important. And the big composite that we found today was mule's ear balsam root, which is another plant that grows all over the arid areas of the Pacific Northwest. In every desert there are balsam roots somewhere in that desert. Usually if it's a low desert, they're at higher elevations and deeper soils. So they typically grow on north and east-facing slopes. So really a beautiful plant. And it always grows every spring out of the roots and bulb from last year. So it's not a bulb as we think of it, it's more of a tuber. And every year that tuber sends up new leaves, new flowers. And some balsam root plants will have upwards of 20, 25 blossoms. And these are composite blossoms, which attract huge numbers of pollinators. Pollinators are so vitally important to plants on any desert situation. So important. And the other plant that we saw today that I'm always amazed at, and that is Hooker's balsam root. Hooker's balsam root is a smaller, thinner leaf than the mule's ear balsam root and grows in extremely hot, dry lithophile sites. So this is a plant that grows just in rocky, thin-soiled sites, and that makes it truly an amazing desert plant. One of the areas that we came across today had large arroyos in it, or gullies that had been eroded out over time. And in the bottom of these gullies are streams and springs, and they are absolutely bordered by thick willows and other woody shrubs. And these are called desert riparian buffers, and they are super important to most wildlife that live in deserts because they provide cover from both winter and summer thermal cover. They provide food in the form of large numbers of insects or berries, or some animals live in them, nest in them. Huge percentage of birds that utilize desert areas visit those riparian areas sometime during the day to get water, eat insects, eat ripe currant berries, whatever. But the interesting thing is, most people don't think of riparian areas as being in a desert setting, but they frequent desert settings. And so today, if you looked out across the landscape, you would never see these riparian buffers because they're down in the bottom of a deeply eroded arroyo or canyon, and they're hidden down in there. So birds know where to go, as do the wild animals like deer and coyotes and rabbits and all kinds of mice. They know to go down in there if they want water. In these wet areas in a desert are desert amphibians, and we will talk about them later. But truly an amazing ecological structure within the larger desert is the riparian area. The unfortunate thing is that we don't treat these riparian areas with much dignity. In fact, a lot of people see them as places to dump garbage, to throw all kinds of crud into the stream, into those areas, and get them out of sight. So we have found flipped over vehicles, wash machines, all kinds of ice boxes, freezers, you name it, flipped in, kids' toys, big sheets of plastic, all kinds of junk thrown into these incredibly valuable sites. And it's because of ignorance, and it's because people don't have any regard for the landscape. And the sad thing is, a lot of these objects that they throw away contain pollutants and poisons, and those affect the wild animals and the water quality that those animals depend on. And oftentimes downstream, it's human beings that depend on that water quality, and it is already polluted by the time it gets to them. So please, never throw stuff into a desert stream, because that water is so valuable to so many different living animals and organisms. And it is also, those waters are recharge waters for deeper aquifers downstream. And so when we pollute those upper aquifers and those shallow aquifers, we pollute deeper aquifers on down the system. A lot of people wonder why they get this sickness and this disease and that problem. It's because we have polluted the water that we're so dependent on. And so whenever you're out in the desert, it's not somewhere to chuck your garbage and throw your trash into. It is an important area, and a lot of wildlife depends on these areas, including human beings. And so I would urge folks, if you find trash or you see people doing it, say something. When you don't say anything, then it's like you agree with what they're doing. And so speak up. The other thing is, a lot of pollutants that end up in desert water do go into the deeper aquifers. And that can be a real problem through time and on downstream. So it's an important thing to remember. An amazing plant that we found today is short, stiff sage. This is a member of the Artemisia family of sagebrush, but it is so unique because it only grows in hot, dry sites, and it never gets very big, no more than 15 inches tall. And it is a plant that can store immense amounts of water in its roots and withstand the hottest summer, the driest summers, and yet in the fall and in the spring, when there's some moisture, it stores up that water. Short stiff sage is a plant that is often used by all kinds of sagebrush obligates. It's nested in, and it is also a plant where sage grouse frequently strut in short stiff sage growth areas. So they become what are called leks. And most leks that I've observed in my lifetime of sage grouse have been in short stiff sage growth sites. Short stiff sage is a plant that can grow to be 90 to 100 years old with ease because no one bothers it. It's in areas that cannot be farmed, and animals, livestock won't touch it. So it is a very pungent artemisia, and if you ever get a chance to smell it, it is truly amazing. It is something you won't forget. Short stiff sage is also a plant that provides ground cover, and its root systems spread out a little beyond the plant, and they hold that soil. So they're very important. Another plant that we found today is a species of green paintbrush. Also, some people call it owl clover. Owl clover is a saprophyte, and it lives off the roots of sage. So it is saprophytic, which means it is a parasite. But this particular paintbrush type also has its own chlorophyll. So not only does it connect to the roots of other plants and get nutrients from it, but it also is able to photosynthesize itself as well. So that allows it even more energy to grow in areas where you normally would never expect to find a paintbrush. So really an amazing plant. We found quite a few plants in one little area today, and that was unexpected. Another plant that we tripped across, actually two plants, were species of lupine. We had a white blooming lupine and a large blue lupine. And these lupine are toxic to livestock, and they are incredibly important to native pollinators. So all kinds of butterflies and bees and wasps and bumblebees and ants and beetles utilize lupine blooms to get the nectar and to eat pollen. So lupines are super important. There is an insect that is a lupine obligate, and that is the Lupine Blue, which is a small, beautiful butterfly. So of the Lupine Blues, the male is beautiful blue when he opens up and shows his dorsal surface, and the female is a rust red brown. Absolutely gorgeous. And they lay their eggs only on lupines, which are a legume. And when they lay their eggs, those eggs hatch out into instars or caterpillars, and they feed on the lupine leaves, and eventually they will build a chrysalis, and they will sit there and eventually hatch out next spring as adult Lupine Blue butterflies. And right now the Lupine Blues are all over in the lupines. Absolutely beautiful. So another butterfly that we found today was the desert marble. This is a little white butterfly that has a gorgeous ventral surface, which looks mossy green and yellow on the hind wing, and then it has a funny teardrop black marking on the upper wing on the dorsal surface. Desert marbles are amazing because they are very rapid flyers and they utilize many composite flowers. That's what they nectar on. So they enjoy nectaring on the desert aster, the Oregon sunshine, all kinds of other composites. And they are super fast flyers. So that allows them to evade getting caught by a lot of birds. And they only have a very short flight period, about 3 weeks to a month. And their flight period's over and you don't see them the rest of the year. So those insects get their nectar, they lay their eggs on their food plant, the adults die. And then the eggs hatch out. The instars or the caterpillars feed on their food plant and then go into a chrysalis and they will emerge next spring. So it's amazing to find a small butterfly that is only here for a few weeks really in the spring of the year, and that's it. And so if you're not out here, you will never see one. Another butterfly that we found was the arrowhead blue, which is a larger blue, and lots of people call them little blues, but they're not so little. And they have a beautiful white arrowhead design on the ventral surface of the wing, the underwing, on the hind wing, and it looks just like an arrowhead. And they're called arrowhead blues. And they also like to nectar on composites as well as buckwheat.